Which service? Army. And there's a roadside place that we can.
Oh, no, now I'm seeing myself. Okay.
It's all around 60, so
That's a classic name there.
and,
Yeah. Probably.
Whoa, what would be like?
Jail, if you go in and you can put yourself in jail, take pictures. Just like posters and glasses, so long with your face.
I know a lot of us dead, but we still want to say. Thank you.
That's where those cemetery plots, they have a picnic yesterday, they're gonna do it tomorrow.
Oh, I know the Joneses. That's why I got a phone call Friday night.
Yeah. So, not today,
Speak to my wife. Business partner.
They said she probably wants to.
Okay, that works.
Yeah, thank you, appreciate it.
Hello, Brendan.
Hey there, how's everybody today?
Good, how are you?
Good. My business partner along with boss. Mariana.
I just like, nice to meet you.
Well,
Yeah. Not much has happened to me except a whole lot of needless work.
no, that's all.
Thanks, works for me, it does the thing.
Yeah, that's indeed.
Me too. Do we have a, that's on your agenda?
Yes, please. Oh, do you need a piece of it? Yeah.
You want to introduce this?
So there's a
Okay.
long time no see.
Gosh darn it, Scott, I forgot you were coming to this. So I got boxes of gifts for you. I didn't even think about you being here today. I was gonna bring them Thursday night.
I like your time. You always have a great time.
Oh.
And I have a Christmas tie, I should have brought it up, I couldn't find it. I don't know if my record is not still.
Try to make it, we can see that.
Go ahead. Scott, how are you?
That's your dark.
Not for me. They're up the lot, it's not.
Should give us a nice clear count. Nice clear view.
I didn't bring my turn.
Yeah.
No problem.
I'm like, I don't know. I'll go over some shit. Oh, yeah, I guess.
It's the same as that.
So you don't understand.
Right.
I wanted to see a little intro.
Well, I'll start. I'll turn it to you second. I was gonna go straight into it, but I'll go second. Everybody ready? Everybody ready? Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Time is 4:02, December 5th, 2022. We're having a workshop meeting of the commission. It's a very simple agenda. We had a meeting last week with Brendan Hurley and several developers and attorneys, and just it was a nice group of people that we met with, staff and these gentlemen who are interested in developing a parcel of land we call Orange Camp Point. Right now, it was originally the Auto Mall development was one of the first names for that. They are interested in perhaps determining the collective will of the commission on changing the comp plan. Is the primary reason we're here. They want to understand where the commission sits. I couldn't tell them that because only you individually can tell them what you think as commissioners. And they need an answer. It's they're spending money every day trying to do this development. So they need answers to questions. And I offered to Mr. Hurley that the commission would do its best to make itself available to him if he wanted to. And he did call me back later and say, yes, he would like to do that. We put this on the calendar today, which was as quickly as he and I could work out our schedules. Thank you all, members of the commission, for making this clear. This was our first shot and everybody's here. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. I'm going to turn it over briefly to Scott Simpson to do an introduction as well for the record. Thank you, Scott.
Good evening, or good afternoon. This was requested by the developer, property owner, to talk about this project. My advice is there's going to be no vote, no motion tonight. This is just he wants to get a sense of your views of policy changes. Whenever we do a development, there's two things that could occur. There's two steps. One is, do we need to change our rules for a development, or are we just applying rules that we currently have to an applicant? When we just apply existing rules to an applicant, that's what we hear is called quasi-judicial. That's set up by a certain standard that we have to follow in terms of the evidence that you base your decision on. But when you start changing your rules, those are considered policy decisions, taking legislative action, and you have very broad discretion in doing that. If we were just talking about a rezoning, I would not want you to express your opinion on a project outside the quasi-judicial hearings, and you should be basing your opinion on the evidence presented. This is a policy change to effectively allow a portion of the employment center land use, residential use. And a couple things just to point out. One, I said a portion of it. The request is to amend the employment center land use to allow a certain number of residential units. The applicant would utilize, if that was to be approved and go forward, the applicant would utilize that allotment that allow residential use in what's called now Orange Camp development, formerly Auto Mall. There is additional employment center property with employment center land use to the east or north of this project along I-4 that is also in the city, that it still has the employment center. So if this development utilizes up all the residential that would be allowed if everything went through, the balance of the employment center, this land to the east and north, would have to be developed commercially. Or our comprehensive plan would have to be amended to allow additional residential over what was allowed for this particular development. So I think it's important to realize this isn't changing all of our employment center to residential. The intent is to allow residential, but the development would utilize up all that we're allowing in the employment center. Also, that area to the additional land in the city to the north and east is part of the Victoria Park DRI. That is also provides best commercial and industrial use. So even if the city decided in the future to change that area to residential, we couldn't without amending that DRI, which has a totally separate process, which is not exclusively within this city to make the decision. The next thing I just wanted to point out is that this is a workshop. It's up to the mayor, but there is not a requirement for public participation at this stage. The mayor can allow it if he so chooses, but the law requires that we allow public participation before a vote is taken on this. There's going to, like I said, there's going to be no vote today. You all can just express your views on the policy of changing this area to allow residential. It's a legislative policy decision for the growth of this community, specifically in that area. We will, if it goes forward, there will be at least one hearing before the PLDRC and 2 hearings before the City Commission on this exact question, where the public will have complete opportunity to express their opinion. So technically under the law, public participation at this particular meeting, because of the workshop, the decisions being made, it is not required. But those are the 2 guiding things I'd like to kind of give you some guidance on. Does anybody have any questions?
You mentioned the policy, application of the policy for the employment center. Does this not require a change in the comp plan itself?
Yes.
So
that's a policy decision.
that is a policy decision.
There's 2, there
Just
will
want to
be,
clarify that we're actually
Yes.
changing the comp plan, not
Yes.
just defining the way we use the word employment or the words employment.
yeah, you're gonna amend it to, right now, the employment center allows no residential. So we're amending that to allow a limited amount of residential. And all the residential that's being requested to be allowed in the employment center will be utilized by this development. But the policy changes you'll be making is amending your employment center land use to allow the residential, and any changes that are required to our land development regulations to allow this type of development to occur. Those will be policy changes. The quasi-judicial change issue that you'll be dealing with is amending the zoning to apply the new land development regulation that allows this type of development. So the rezoning will be the quasi-judicial decision you make, but that comes after you make your policy decisions to put the rules in place that allow that rezoning to be considered.
So let me clarify one more point, and it is just for clarification. On quasi-judicial, we are here to weigh, credible and
Substantial competent evidence.
substantial competent evidence. I always get that wrong. Substantial competent evidence.
Yes.
That's what we look at in a quasi-judicial hearing.
Yes.
That's why we have an expert for the Historic Preservation Board to come forward to give credibility to the testimony. And it makes a big difference to us as a city to have that on our side. But the policy change is simply based on politics, or what we want it to be based on, or opinion, or it's not bound by any legal standard. Is that correct? Or how would you characterize that?
It's sort of our government is based on the separation of powers. and then you have the legislative, executive, judicial. And they don't, each one has their own roles and don't step on the shoes. The legislative branch is what the policy decisions you make. So the only time a court will step in to potentially change or invalidate a policy decision, unless you clearly abuse your discretion. You almost have to act fraudulent. If y'all happen to change or make a policy decision that was inconsistent with any other policy and it just happened to affect property the five of you own, the court might step in. So, but absent that egregious, the court's not gonna say that's a bad policy. It's yours to set up a policy. If you say residential is good over there, that's your policy. If you say we don't really want residential over there, we wanna keep that commercial, that's a policy decision on how this community grows in that area. And courts won't step in. So that's the legal system.
Thank you for clarifying that. I appreciate it.
My question was, does anyone know why residential was excluded from the employment center to begin with in the compound?
No, that's performing.
Anyone?
I think I don't know, is that the actual answer to that. My guess is that we were looking purely for commercial there, but that's truly a guess. I don't know why.
Oh, I'd like to know the rationale.
Probably for the tax base of the businesses that are the residential area.
Yeah, I don't know what was in the mind of the original framers, if you will, of that sounds a little too lofty, but, the original writers of the document. Any other questions before we turn it over?
Yeah, 'cause I guess the way the employment center for the city, only incorporated about 4 of the acres we're talking about. The rest of that employment center is that land that, before the annexation that we did for the auto mall, that was, in the city, land to the north, there's 4 acres of little triangle piece of this particular development. And like I said, that was part of the Victoria Park DRI, which dictated commercial here too. So some of the antiquated, and I don't know if we influenced the Victoria Park DRI or they just said we're going to incorporate this and make it commercial and industrial. I don't know how that dialogue went, but the balance of when this property was annexed into the city and they asked for the employment center future land use designation, that was done and requested by the current property. The previous property owners may have been involved in the land to the north.
Mr. Hurley, I'll turn it over to you, and thank you for your patience. I thought it was going to be a brief introduction to it, but
I'm happy to be here in front of you all, and thank you very much for facilitating this for me today. I really appreciate it. And it's nice to see familiar faces, and nice to see you too. Congratulations on your election. So, anyway, my wife, Mariana, is here with me. Everybody calls her Mari, but she's also my business partner and has endured the brain damage that I have afforded her over the last 7 years. I can answer Rick's question just a little bit about the history behind the development area of the economic center to the employment center to the north. And by the way, I'm here today without my attorney because he bruises my shins every time he's with me, kicking me under the table. So I'm here, I'm not an attorney, I'm not going to address any of the legalities involved with any of this. That's for Scott and Rob and Tara and the other legal folk to deal with. I just want to deal with the facts and the most important elements here. But the history behind what happened to the north was based on a promise that was made by the city of DeLand to Lake Helen when Arvida first came in. Okay, we're going to get all the residential and it's all going to be annexed into the city of DeLand. Of course, it was Volusia County at the time. And the promise was, look, we're going to give you this area to the north here, and we call it, employment center, and we can do all these things. There's no road in there, mind you. There's no access to it, but maybe get a little deep over there. So it was a sort of a Trojan horse, really, if you will. I'm not being mean about it or anything, but my communication with the Stewart family, with the Ford family, with the city of DeLand, and all the history behind that, that's basically what happened. So at one point in time, there was a road design called Frontage Road, The plans were drawn up to show that road connecting all the way to Summit to the north, affording that access to the employment center to the north of my property. And then a few years ago, actually back in 2018, 2019, the city of DeLand filed a lawsuit against the city of Lake Helen. I paid to fund that lawsuit for Lake Helen because they took a dim view in DeLand of Lake Helen getting those 20 some odd acres that I annexed or proposed to annex into the city of Lake Helen. And the plan at that time, of course, was for the auto mall to be a commercial engine there and to have some residential at some point, probably multifamily, included in that planned development at the time. And of course, along came COVID, just to give you some history, and COVID absolutely killed the auto mall stone dead. I mean, not only did we have the issue with the nervousness of the dealers who would go in there, but we also had the manufacturers pulling back and say, oh, we can't supply you with cars. You can build these new facilities if you want to, but we can't promise you that you'll have anything to sell out of it. So one by one, starting in March, April, May of 2020, Asbury, the publicly traded company, pulled out. Other dealers in town, who I won't name, but they pulled out. The Mazda folks pulled out. I have a letter of intent from Mazda. The Volkswagen folks pulled out. I had a letter of intent from them. It was a disaster, a career embarrassment for me. Of course, I don't know if embarrassment is the word, but it was certainly a very stressful time when they all pulled out one right after the other. So I licked my wounds, and my wife consoled me, and we said, how can we retweak this? What can we possibly do? So we tried our best to sell this property to other interested parties, and the only thing that came up was a very attractive product, which, I'll back up a little bit. 2 years worth of revenue for the city of Lake Helen with this project would be north of $2 million, $2,100,000 and some odd thousand. And I worked on those numbers with a very eminent financial firm that said my numbers were very conservative, and if anything, it would be quite a bit higher than that. So I did produce a folder here that shows the breakdown of those numbers. Basically, and there's a slide in there that shows it. This is what we're talking about for 2 years worth of revenue. I'm just going to get to the root of the thing here. So $2,107,238 is the estimate, the conservative estimate, and the numbers to back that up on the slide that follows. Here's the thing.
What can those $2 million do for the city of Lake Helen? I'm sure there's a lot.
Do you have any documentation there that's going to tell us what it's going to cost us to provide services to this?
Yes, we do. And I have spoken to Lee about this, and you all apparently are going to do your own financial analysis. You're probably looking at about $400,000 maximum, because you have the franchise fees from utilities, which I haven't even included in here. You also have some more taxes and revenues from impact fees and so forth, a lot of which aren't in here too.
Is that an annual number?
No, that's over the 2-year time period. Because
Is there going to be an annual expense to the city to provide services?
very, very little expense, because the utilities are coming from the city of DeLand. You might have to hire a couple of police officers. I'm figuring, worst case scenario, you're still going to have more than $1.5 million net out of this, just in this 2-year time period. And of course, you have a little bit of a windfall with the impact fees and so forth as the townhomes and the multifamily is constructed. And you also, of course, will now then have the benefit of the road connecting to that PC to the north, so development can actually finally happen there. And I did have somebody interested in that product, which was Insurance Office of America, John Rittenauer, and his son Heath were keenly interested in developing it there, but the stewards at the time weren't willing to foot the bill to create the road, and they weren't willing to foot the bill to bring the utilities to the site, which I had done. So I think there's still a high possibility of some really good development to the north of my property, particularly in that we would have residences close by to provide a home for the folks that would work in that area. But to answer your question, the short version of it is, Lake Helen is not going to have a high percentage of expenses. It's not like you're getting $2 million in revenue and you got $2 million in expenses, not even close. I mean, at the worst case scenario, you're giving $500,000 over the 2 years with this project. And of course, you're gonna have utility revenue to offset it, which hasn't even been included.
Let me interject here for just a moment. At the meeting we had the other day with the developers and the attorneys and everybody, we talked about putting together this financial analysis and the Hurleys and their group said they would hire, I forgot the name of the firm.
Fishkind and Associates.
I'm sorry.
Fishkind and Associates.
Fishkind and Associates, that name didn't come up at the meeting, but Fishkind and Associates is a well-known firm to put together numbers on what this would cost the city, and then present that to us, and we would be able to go over those numbers to verify it independently through our financial people, or even hire our own firm to look at those numbers, and make sure that we were looking at accurate numbers. Not that you would misrepresent anything, but it's just incumbent upon us to check, trust but verify.
Sure. And there's some very basic numbers on that chart that shows where the math is coming from.
But we haven't gone through that full process yet.
No, and the last question I had was, the great majority of this project is going to be on the acreage that you annexed into the city of Lake Helen 4 or 5 years ago, is that not correct?
Correct. I mean, basically, if you look at Lake Helen as Lake Helen, traditional Lake Helen, actual downtown Lake Helen, none of this is going to have any impact on that other than the financial benefit that the city would actually obtain.
I have a question about.
There's two photos there. One is the one with the big numbers in red and the slide beneath, and then there's another photo that gets into some more of the details
Excuse me,
underneath.
I have a question about utility revenues. How do we collect the utility revenues that's being supplied to them by the land?
The agreement between the two cities is that Lake Helen has a percentage of the franchise fee, I think is what they probably are. So Lake Helen gets a franchise fee for those.
I don't know what I'm saying, I'm just talking.
Oh, it's a great question. It's important.
I think it's very relevant to say that this project is on the other side of that fork, which means it's not going to change the characteristics of Lake Helen. It's going to remain as is, it's just going to have more money to deal with a lot of the problems that my husband's been telling me that you guys are dealing with.
Well,
So it's not something that's gonna happen here in your downtown area.
It's not gonna happen here, but we all have to cross that bridge to get to be in Orange City, which means all that traffic is going to impact us.
Well, the good news with that is the traffic impact analysis that we had originally done for the Albemarle project showed considerably more traffic than this product will actually have. And the other benefit, of course, is instead of having 80-foot tall structured concrete parking garages or garages, you instead have a much more appealing face with this project. This is going to be an upper end multifamily. You're going to be having people paying north of $1,500 a month. So you have young, affluent professionals that like to spend money, and it's going to add a lot of economic opportunity.
There's no guarantee in that. That could become Section 8 in a day.
Well, that's why we need to move in this, because I've got a contract with Hill Point right now. But of course, I don't want anybody getting cold feet and backing out of this either. I'd like to get this done as soon as possible. I know there can't be any vote in anything today, but I hope to get at least a touch and feel and some sort of tentative approval is not the word, but just what is the word here? What's the word?
Well, I would characterize it to say that at this point you've hit a point in your process where now to move this forward, to complete an application is going to create a bunch of bills for you. You're going to have to do some serious engineering and spend a whole bunch of money to bring this to a fully complete application. So to do that prior to knowing that we would even want to look at it, if we turn around and say, we don't really give a flip what this looks like, we're gonna say no, it would just be a waste of money.
But yes, I'd much rather have a fast yes than a slow no. You know, so.
Right, so we wanted to kind of step in at this point, even though it's not a vote. We can't talk about it,
Right.
unless we do it in a meeting like this. So we're doing it in a meeting like this, so we can fully communicate, and you can listen to that, and you can make, whatever judgments as a property owner and developer, you want to.
Well, to that point, the reason I annexed the 20 some odd acres into Lake Helen to begin with is, I felt like it would be much easier to deal with Lake Helen than to struggle with the folks in DeLand. And unfortunately, they took it to the deal with it and filed that lawsuit, which shocked me that it happened, but it did. And I thought it was very cool, honestly. And I fought back and said, no, I'm going to stick to my guns. I'm going to annex this property into Lake Helen. And I do think that this will be the economic dynamo that's going to take care of a lot of things. For instance, the comp plan mentions a $700 and some odd thousand amount for upgrading the water system. Well, that is in 2017 dollars. That's triple that today. You're talking about $2,100,000 plus at a minimum. Just the pipes have gone up fivefold in the time period from 2017 to now. And I know this because I had to pay for them on my property. And, I had an engineering estimate from Mead and associates that built the utility to the property a little bit to the east of where the frontage road is going to go. I paid $480,000 for that. Today, that same project, had I not done that, would be $1,740,000. Massive increase from 2019 to 2022. I don't know what's going to be like next year, but of course these polyethylene pipes are a petrochemical product and they're expensive as can be, and so on and so forth. But the bottom line with the projects that need to happen with Lake Helen, money has to be borrowed to pay for those projects. This development can fund that fully over the years. Now, yes, it makes sense to borrow money if the state's going to give you some of it as a credit, and if the interest rates are cheap enough. But if you have millions of dollars of extra revenue coming in over a period of years, it certainly helps to pay off that debt. And with a population of 2,800 or so, it's not fair to tax people anymore over a year. They leave. So I think that the project offers tremendous financial benefit without really any real impact to actually Lake Helen, because I still regard that property the other side of I-4, that's not really Lake Helen in terms of spirit and character. It's just a dynamo that's supposed to produce income to preserve the nature of actually Lake Helen as opposed to property on the far side, on the other side of I-4. I did get into some of the things in the slides about the layout of the project. And you can see there's a little thumb over there on the east side. That's the property that was originally in Lake Helen. And directly to the north of that is the EC, which was an island surrounded by a bunch of land with no access into it. And if you look over the white strip on the west side is the road that I'm building to give access to that property to the north so it can actually be what it's meant to be at some point. The current Stewart Road that bisects the site is an illegal road because it's not up to county standards, and it's also within the DOT right-of-way. So technically that road, if anybody were to build anything there, even a home, that road has to go and access has to be provided within or outside of the DOT restricted right-of-way, which is what that frontage road is going to do. If we could go to the next slide, please, Dominique. That's the area review. You can't see much in there, maybe a squirrel or a badger or something, but there's not a whole lot to be seen there, but you can get the lay of the land. And you can see that thumb thing that I'm talking about up there to the north and east. Again, that's the property that was originally in Lake Helen, probably prior to I-4, actually, I would think. I think that property was in Lake Helen before then. And the next slide shows the premium apartment building that is now under contract. And I'm trying my best to keep these people engaged in this process. I don't want to lose this deal because it is really a nice product. We've got all sorts of amenities built in here. It's, it's going to bring these affluent residents with, as I say, an attractive demographic to the area. And the reason that it's important too is because this can be the engine that can drive commercial development to the north as well. And you can see exactly what I'm talking about, the way this, and there's projects around here that Hill Point has built, several in the Daytona area, some in Jacksonville. He does a beautiful, beautiful job. You can visit his website, Hill Point, with an E in the end.com, and see the projects that they've done. They do a beautiful job, really, really beautiful job. In the next slide, I show the, that was kind of twisted. Sorry about that. If you can turn your head to one side and look at it at an angle, you can see what I'm talking about.
The one that you gave us in our package.
Exactly.
Is clearer than the one on the screen.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know what happened there.
I think it got squeezed by
I
the
think
electronics.
it got economically compressed. So the townhomes to the north of there, they're going to be $300,000 plus townhomes. So they're going to be really attractive units, and D.L. Horton is under contract for that property. And the way they have it laid out is to give a wider and a better sort of boulevard view through the project to the residents there, and laid out with a very, very attractive elements built in all over. And of course, at 300,000 plus, they are going to be very, very nice units. And the next slide. Oh, look at that, it actually worked. This one is convoluted. Now, Rob Doan had done this, it'd be all beautiful and gorgeous, but I have to take responsibility. I did it myself. But I think it kind of tells the tale of if you look at the way the city originally contemplated this with Arvida and the city of Durham, that area, that EC to the north, is regarded as a very important piece of real estate for the city of Lake Helen at some point. And Scott alluded to it earlier. This residential development to the south is going to enhance the attractiveness of that area to the north. And of course, the key point here is we're actually providing a roadway into the area. And without a roadway, that's just an island surrounded by a bunch of land, and nothing's ever going to happen there, except cows might be happy there, but that's it. The other thing that will happen at some point in time, and I don't mean to speak for Volusia County, but the design plan that they had to connect to Summit to the north would take care of some of the traffic that Charlene mentioned earlier. That would be a very, very attractive, they call it frontage road. I'm not sure what it's going to end up being called in the end, something else I imagine. Frontage road is just kind of a horrible name for a road. But going up to Summit / Mackenzie up to the north, at some point that road is going to get built. I'm not going to build it, I'm out of money. But at some point, the developers who develop the property to the north will put that road in. And that plan is in place and has been engineered and so forth by the county. And that's available on the Volusia County website. You can see that over there. The next slide shows the construction. I've already engineered this road and paid many hundreds of thousands of dollars to do so. The road is a bit of an overkill at the current, with this design, but this is the way we're going to build it, and the reason we are is because the future plan for that quote-unquote frontage road to connect all the way up to Summit / Mackenzie requires that it has the ability to handle more traffic than we actually will have going into the site. And of course, the traffic has diminished tremendously from when we were going to have a dozen dealerships in there with parts being delivered and cars being delivered and customers in and out of there all day long. It's not going to be like that anymore. It's going to be a far calmer traffic situation than we had back in those days. But when they do open that road all the way up to Summit Mackenzie, I think it will relieve some of the pressure that's on the current interstate access point. And the next slide shows that area to the north. You can see I-4, and there's some wet areas in that site, so when it does get developed, there's going to be some engineering challenges in there to deal with that. But again, those low areas also provide an opportunity for some water elements that may be attractive in that development. And when Insurance Office of America was looking at that property, they had some nice design ideas. Whether they'll do anything in the future or not, I have no idea. But at that time, that was the concept. And the next slide, I'm quoting from your future land use and the goals and objectives and so forth. And the important thing about this project on the other side of I-4 is that it doesn't impinge on or impede any of the concepts that are laid out in the future land use elements in the comprehensive plan as discussed in this document. And I'm very sensitive to that because I do see the personality of the city of Lake Helen being greatly enhanced by having more money in the bank. It's amazing what you can do when you have a little bit of cash in your coffers. And the next slide, basically I get into the estimates that we discussed earlier, the potable water that was discussed in that plan. Not much of that money has been spent, and there's dire need to get that handled. You know, if you look at the price back then versus the current estimates, I'm actually low, if anything, on those numbers right now.
Now, these numbers represent income or what needs to be spent in order for the project to move forward? What do these numbers represent?
Those numbers represent, they're right out of your comp plan. They are the estimate of the expenditures that would need to happen in a 5-year time period by your comp plan. And what I did is I took those estimates and extrapolated what those same developments, this is on Lake Helen. These are the numbers that Lake Helen would have to expend in order to do the potable water, the streets and the road sidewalks and the drainage facilities. I'm actually quite light on the drainage, I'm very, very light on that one. Because that's going to be a pretty daunting task right there. And this is all on Lake Helen proper, Lake Helen, actually Lake Helen as opposed to what happens on the other side of I-4 is all contained there with the stormwater that we have there already. We have all the capacity we need for that.
Okay, thank you.
So I think what I would hope to do and humbly ask is that I have at least some sort of a checking of the temperature of where we stand for this, because I really don't know that anything else is going to go into that property. I've tried to sell this property night and day with the best brokers that will be including CBRE and every broker known to man at least. And you know, this is what the property will support. And this is, in my view, the best use of that land. Now, there will be a little commercial element immediately straddling Stewart Road and Orange Camp that is within the city of Lake Helen. So that's why Rob and Scott did talk about having some swappy of some commercial elements, whether it's a sit-down restaurant. It's about 4 acres or so. So there is an opportunity for some restaurants or maybe a dental office. We have one of those sniffing around. Some other types of utilizations that would actually be in Lake Helen because of the way that annexation line is drawn. It's somewhat scooched over to the west of current Stewart Road. And that property is not spoken for at this point in time. But being right on Orange Camp Road, I think it would be scooped up pretty quickly.
Well, thank you. Is that non-interrupting?
I don't think I've got anything else here. There's a lot of information that I kept it as succinct as possible in the presentation that you have there, those slides. Everything that's in there can be easily verified. There's no smoke and mirrors involved here. If there's any questions, I'm very happy to answer them.
Well, I'm sure there will be questions, but I guess at this point, we can turn it over to individual commissioners to ask questions or state your opinions on what you've heard, and what your concerns are. I don't know whether I should start or whether I should chime in at the end. I'll be real brief with my concerns. One of my main concerns is that, Mara, you mentioned that, this doesn't impact what we consider to be downtown Lake Helen and the nature of what we currently feel as our community. What it does impact is that there will be 400-ish, and that's who knows exactly what, 400 or so voters over on that side, in these dwellings. And that will significantly impact Lake Helen's political life. Not necessarily negatively, but it'll be an impact. It might be completely neutral in some ways. One of our only other developments, not like this really, but is the villas that we've all, in our campaigns, had to take the villas into account because they're a significant voting group within the city, even though it's a very small part of the city. But they matter a lot. They can sway an election. And this would have that same impact.
May create some redistricting as well.
It would definitely create some redistricting, significant redistricting. But we all, once you think about it a little bit, we kind of understand what that would mean. Probably would not require redistricting until the next census. So that would be 10 years from now, ish, 9, 8 years, whatever. But when that happens, it'll be a significant impact on where the districts lie within the city. Again, that's kind of a neutral thing. It's in some ways, but it is an impact. So, Heather, would you like to start?
I'd like a moment to kind of take it all in. There's a lot of info in here you didn't get a chance to read. So I don't know if
That's
you'll
fine.
afford me a couple of minutes.
Of course, of
Should I
course.
get started?
I'll get it started.
All right, Mr. Basso, we'll turn it over to Mr. Basso first.
I look at this,
Vice Mayor.
I look at this process from, what's Lake Helen need the most? What is our most dire need? And to me, it's always been funding. We've been a modest blue-collar community for a very long time. We've postponed spending money on infrastructure because we just didn't have it to go do what we needed to do. So it's attractive to me there. And so I would like us to do our own version of, okay, what is this gonna generate and what is it gonna cost to support? And because I'm not a fan of the salespeople providing me with the information that I need.
No question. That's going to be
So,
And they were completely amenable to that.
yeah, okay, so with that said, I also am well aware that 5 years ago, this property wasn't in the city of Lake Helen. This opportunity would not have even been presented to us. It would happen if it was in the city of DeLand. It would happen if it was in Volusia County. And we would have no say in it. And we would get no revenue from it if it truly is a plus revenue scenario.
I appreciate this.
So to me, I see that as an opportunity. And I think that if we spit in the eye of it, if you will, because it doesn't fit the ideal model of what Lake Helen is, I think it might be overlooking an opportunity. And so with that said, once we run the numbers and we look at it, and it truly is a financial gain to the city, I would support it. Because although it does create a traffic problem, it's not in downtown Lake Helen. It's not on our bedroom community streets.
That's not as bad as it would have been, had it been the other law.
Exactly.
Which I wish it had been.
Well, but, so, I know there's drawbacks to it, and I do know that, when you look at, bringing in, expanding your city limits and creating more development, that typically on the residential side, unless it's high-end residential, it doesn't tend to be, income producing. But when you go to condos or apartment complex, because the footprint is so small, they are. And, so,
It's essentially commercial, really.
exactly,
Well,
exactly.
One thing that and along those lines, if I can just throw in, I've always heard the same thing, that residential within a community is basically break even for the city itself. Whatever revenue you get, you end up spending. That's almost perfectly break even. Commercial is, and if that's here, the commercial is a much higher revenue for what you'd spend. And then this kind of splits the difference, but I don't know where. And that's why when we had that meeting, I said, I need to know where.
Yes,
I need to know where that split is and how much it really means to us.
So if it works out to be a financial gain to the city, I think the downsides will be offset by the revenue sides. And I love the fact that it's on the other side of the interstate. And
I knew you were going to say.
because of that, I would support.
Well, to add you're dead right about residential, but when you're talking about units that are $300,000 at minimum, and I did subtract $50,000 per unit, assuming that they're going to be homesteaded in the calculation here.
And it's a real bonus. I don't think anybody's thinking about it, and I heard it because I've been in infrastructure business my whole life, is having that road that now is connecting to that other parcel. It may be green now, but with the way things are developing in the land, the number of houses, eventually it's not going to be green anymore, and it's going to be, it's going to want to be developed. And, we as people who live here, I have this love-hate relationship with development. It's made me money in my lifetime, but I also love the little downtown Lake Helen and the little downtown DeLand and that small town community thing. But those things are gone outside of our community. Right. I mean, they really are. The development of the land has just been over the top in the last 10 years.
Who knows, maybe with this commercial development, once we get it caught with the
And
apartments,
yeah,
you won't even have to go all the way to DeLand to
No.
get everything you need.
that's true. And
End up staying-
it's on the other side of the interstate as
Yes.
well. So a lot of it doesn't really affect this veteran community that we have here.
Exactly.
Anyway, I'm done.
Well, I think another part of this too is it should lend some opportunity to Lake Helen proper. I hate using that term. Actually, Lake Helen. Perhaps some merchants can actually open businesses and do well now. And I do think another element with this that's a big deal is now the utility access for Forest Main is available to Lake Helen. I mean, obviously, it's got to be jack and board over I-4, and I ain't paying for it. I hasten to add, but it is nevertheless available for considerably less than it would have been before. So that's a big deal, and I know there's some properties. I'm not sure what the future of the septic tank is, or what the
Expansion.
yeah, or what the environmentalists are saying about it, or whatever. But the fact that you've got a Forest Main right there available to you, I think that's a big deal.
It is big.
Oh, I got a couple of comments.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I was gonna turn it over to you next,
I was
Commissioner
still against
Bishop.
that whole traffic thing because I sat in that traffic the other night, just from the apartment buildings down on.
If you wanna go ahead and weigh in with all of your thoughts,
Okay.
we'll turn the floor over to you.
And then, the tax base, we're gonna get taxes off of what the property is worth, not those rents. It's gonna be what the property's worth. It doesn't matter if the rent is $1,500 or not, it still can become Section 80. That's gonna drive the price of that property down. And he's talking about a Trojan horse, I believe that is gonna be a Trojan horse for us. The land's gonna put there, we need some affordable housing, let's stick it over there close to Lake Helen.
I could definitely see that. happening.
Yes,
That
and-
concerns me.
It does me too. And, I just, he's letting you know that he will support it, I'm letting you know that I will not
You have
support it.
to think of the future generations as well. I know you're thinking, I don't wanna be in this traffic.
No, I don't.
I know, but there's a whole town.
I don't think anybody in this town wants to be in that
I know,
traffic.
but maybe they need other things that they're willing to work with going, how often do you actually go?
We have to go all the time because there's nothing in here.
So maybe there will be now.
Well, there is an actual, a demographic impact. There, with that many more people living within this circle.
We have to
this
supply
demographic circle.
police protection, we have to maintain those roads
I
over
understand
there. And
No, actually, we do not have to maintain the roads over there,
why?
because there's going to be an industrial agreement between the entities that are there in that area to maintain those roads. The city of DeLand is going to claim the frontage road and maintain that. So the roads within the complex are going to be maintained by Hill Point, D.R. Horton, and the other commercial entities that are going to go.
D.R. Horton, yeah, we've dealt with D.R. Horton before.
But where I was going was that demographic, the increase in the number of people within whatever circle you want to draw, Lake Helen in, will be impacted by this. And it could lead to more viable businesses here within what we consider to be downtown Lake Helen, along Main and Euclid and whatever.
Well, they said that about or about Victoria Hills too, and they built their own stuff and they keep their own stuff.
I understand, and I know, I understand, and I'm not making that argument, I'm saying
No, I'm
that
just
argument could, it's part of what will change because of this.
Right.
The big demographics of this area will be significantly changed. Part of that, it will impact the schools. The
Yes,
schools will become larger. And that's one of the most frustrating parts of traffic within Lake Helen. It has nothing to do with your development, but Ivy Hong and Lucia Pines, another school here in town, really create a lot of school traffic. It's very frustrating for people. And that will do nothing but increase with the increase of people living here close. I don't know exactly how the county will deal with that, but they'll have to provide schools for all the kids that live there. Whether they'll just put in some portables and cram it in tighter, I don't know what happens, but it's a legitimate concern. When we initially did the okay for Ivy Hall, it seemed like a great idea to fill up that old industrial bulk, but it actually had a huge impact on city traffic, negative impact that I think all of us regret in many ways.
Charlie, may I ask you a question?
sure.
What would you like to see go into that property on the other side of Line 4? What would you?
Be honest, nothing. Yeah.
That's not practical.
And what do you think about the current situation of the town, of Lake Helen?
Lake Helen has always been like this. I've lived here my whole life and we always struggle by, but we always move forward. We just have, my problem is overdevelopment everywhere. With the woods of Lake Helen, they're putting houses in every day. They're just growing. And we already are having a problem maintaining everything that we have now. I just would like, you can't get out to 44 now because of what's been built out there by the college. You can't go out Pasadena Road anymore because now they've got a whole bunch of new apartment buildings out there. You have to go through Orange County, you have to go through a roundabout down there. It's almost like we're almost like stuck on an island here.
These people need to stop having kids,
Well,
because what do we do?
and your point is well taken, that we can't just hope that development will never happen, because it's going to. What our comp plan did 20 years ago, or whenever, I always say 20 years ago, but I've been saying that for a long time. Our comp plan dramatically changed the build out for Lake Helen proper, from, I think, around 20,000, brought it down to around 6,000. I mean, it was a dramatic decrease, and it made a lot of people very upset because they lost a lot of density on their properties. But we weathered that storm back then. I wasn't involved, but it was a storm and it was weather. And now the build out for Lake Ellen is around 6,000. We're still only around 3,000. So even just within our borders, as it builds out, we could double.
Yeah.
We probably will double in population. That's without including this at all. So that development is going to happen, and that's kind of your point. It's like we can't just bury our heads in the sand and hope it never happens. What we're asked to do is to manage the development as best we can. But I understand you have campaigned and won on a platform of hell no. If I can paraphrase what you're at, I'm not sure.
No, you're right.
That's well and good when people start complaining about the water and the pipes and everything else, and
And
you
you're right.
pay for it.
And they do that on a daily basis, yes, you're right.
You're okay with that?
This is the
No, I'm not okay with it.
This is the constant tension, though, that we live under. It's the constant tension that we've lived under for a long time.
Like, if I-
So we're all restating.
I'm a woman. If I were in charge of some city and I saw that my citizens were dealing with that kind of stuff, I would go to fix it. Yes, there's a price for that, but there's a price for everything in life.
And sometimes you just don't want to sell your soul. And I don't feel like I want to sell myself.
So what makes you think you'd be selling your soul?
Anything that looks too good to be true, it probably is. And that seems like an awful lot of money for us to we're just gonna get that money and it's not gonna cost us anything in the long run. It's definitely gonna cost
Well,
us.
that's why we're doing that.
That's why you should do your homework, is gonna do. Because I understand that you're skeptical, but we're not gonna stand here and lie to you in the city.
Well,
Because
obviously,
we're gonna look like idiots and.
No, and I don't believe that you are being disingenuous in any way. I really don't believe that, not in the slightest. What we're trying to avoid are the law of unintended consequences, which are always, that's what we have to look at as policymakers. If we are entering into an agreement with the city of DeLand to provide water and sewage and all of that, and there will be what's the word? Premiums on top of that. They're gonna bill us and we can bill them. We'll do the billing and we can add a premium. So there is a potential for income there, but we've got to look at all that and know what those numbers will be.
We're gonna do the billing. Think
Yes,
about that for a second.
I know.
We gotta pay somebody to do
Yeah.
that. How much work that's gonna create, and not only that,
You're right, but we're talking about you're not supporting the position, I'm supporting the position. What we need to do is look at it all.
yeah, exactly.
That's the very first thing that
Exactly.
I said, we need to do our own study, and find out how real this is.
I just wanna make one point. When those water bills don't get paid, we're still gonna have to pay like that or the land. We'll be the one holding these water bills that get paid this month.
but I think Charlie, and obviously Fishkind and Associates, and that they're hired by me, they're not going to be, what was the word you used, Cameron? I forget. They're not going to be the right company for you to deal with if they're my customer, it's kind of like that.
Yeah.
Well, we have to do our due diligence to review those numbers and to make sure that they do include things like our additional staff that we will incur, we will have to put on additional staff. Even if, it doesn't seem like much, but if we double our water billing staff, that matters in a city this
Yes,
size.
it does.
Well, of course, but if you spend $300,000 or $400,000 extra per year on staff, which is unlikely that you would have to spend that much, just the revenue from the utility billing alone is going to more than offset that, and I haven't even included that in these numbers purposely. Because I didn't want to be blowing smoke, because I don't know what those numbers are going to be.
And to be
Or
fair,
how much water they're going to use, or how much consumption tax they're going to pay, or any of those things, I just don't know.
right, and we don't want to get the cart too far ahead of the horse here, because we don't have solid numbers yet. But we do have concerns, and we're just voicing those concerns. And I knew that's what was gonna happen today. So I'm glad people are getting an opportunity to do that. Commissioner Eckert or Mr. Rutledge, would you like to weigh in?
Yeah, go ahead, I'm sorry.
In the process of moving it from the auto mall to now the residential complexes, did you look at the possibility of creating a combination commercial residential structure that would, the new concept that a lot of places are going to where you have like a 50,000 square foot commercial structure and residential suites on the floors above the commercial structure.
We looked at everything, and I looked, you can ask my wife, I spent plenty of sleepless nights trying to figure out how best to do these things. And one of the projects that we looked at, and it's probably out there in the public domain, but Travel America wanted this property in Warsaw. And they were in communication with the FDOT, because the FDOT desperately wants a truck stop somewhere. Well, that conversation between the FDOT and Travel America kind of morphed into another conversation, because as you probably know, they've done the project in Tallahassee, they've got another one that they've done somewhere else in Florida, I forget where. But I got a lot of resistance from that, from the city of DeLand immediately, and I anticipated that that would not be a project that would go down well with the city of Lake Helen either, and it wasn't in my vision. I wasn't desperate enough to pursue any conversation with them, because anytime you deal with the state of Florida, it gets complicated. So I walked away from it.
Yeah, I was following that FDOT policy. They want to eliminate the two rest areas down near, was it Longwood?
Yeah.
Yeah, they want to eliminate those two rest areas, and to be able to do that, you gotta have a truck stop up in this area. So that's what they would push, that's why they're pushing.
Well, they're difficult people to deal with, no offense.
I was looking at the prospect of having the commercial, because that would be your employment center, and then having the residential on top, which could be residential, high-end residential suites. And this would fill both of our purposes. We would get our commercial in there with a lot of, not the big mall-type businesses or the big high-end stores, but you get a lot of the lower stores, the individual clothing stores and little restaurants and stuff like that into those complexes.
So if I'm thinking about what you're expressing here, trying to understand would you be thinking similar to what's there in our Vita now, the little commercial area, but then 2 stories on top of that with residential just plopped on top? You'd have the dental offices and the.
Yeah, where there's this spread out, this would put it all in one structure. And then you have the apartments and everything above. You could even go to the ones where you have the 12-foot commercial on the first floor, and then the 10-foot offices on the second floor, and then the 3rd and 4th floors are 2-story residential apartments.
Well, we tried that, and CBRE had a couple of possibilities, but it didn't math out, and they just felt that the demographic in the area wasn't sufficient to support it. And I do think that the property to the north is going to be a cash register at some point for the city of Lake Helen. I'm not interested in developing it because software development is what I do, and I'm not doing any more real estate development ever in my life, even if I live to 150. I'm done. So the bottom line of the property to the north is its access and its visibility right on I-4 lends itself to some of the sorts of things that you're talking about. And I see maybe a Heathrow-ish type of development happening up there at some point in time. And had the Stewart family been more amenable and had agreed to build that road, Insurance Office of America would have their offices there today. That would have happened. But would have, could have, should have. There was no road, and the Stewarts weren't ready to build it, that's for sure.
And along that same woulda, coulda, shoulda lines, and I don't mean to step on your time, I'll give you all the time you want, but this is what they're bringing to us today, and I don't think they're gonna amend this significantly, so anyway, go ahead.
Well, the reason I bring that up is because all I see in here is a bunch of concrete and steel. And I'm not seeing
You mean the Albemarle project or
the residential development complex.
well,
And
that is
I'm
still,
seeing a lot less green space in this complex than what was in for the auto mall complex. I'm seeing a heck of a lot of concrete buildings and very little green space. And,
It's actually the same ratio as we had before for green space, it's exactly the same ratio.
well, it's spread out little pockets here and there instead of large areas like the auto mall had, but the new concept is what they call low impact development, because it has a less of an impact on your green areas and allows that green areas to create the atmosphere that people are looking for when they move into an area. Even apartments are looking for something that's green in the area that they're able to enjoy and look at, and not a bunch of parking spots and buildings and everything like that. So it's, I'm not right now looking at any possibility of changing the comp plan to allow residential.
So you're dead set against it? So you're dead set against it, it's a no starter as far as you're concerned?
Not the way I see it at this time. There'd have to be some change in it, but I don't know what. I look at low impact development as my first thing.
Well, the auto mall certainly wasn't low impact development with 80-foot tall concrete structures for parking. And yeah, I mean, paving everywhere. There was that central boulevard that had that round area. In terms of the total floor area ratio to the property, it was actually more intense than this development. And certainly this development looks a whole lot better. And it is spaced out nicely when you look at the slide, because you've also got a nice water element here, which is almost an acre in itself in the front part of it. And then you've got some common areas and some greenery in the middle of it too. So it's going to be a very attractive, if it ever gets built, a very attractive facility. Certainly not 80 foot up in the air with all concrete car parking. So.
Yeah, that was, I hear what you're saying, that was highly concrete in nature, the auto mall. I actually just went to the auto mall over by Daytona yesterday, did some brief driving around shopping, and it was a lot of traffic, and there was a lot of concrete, a lot of asphalt, and I was glad to come home. But
That almost a different
it is a different, yeah.
What his was going to be.
I never really got deep
His
into
was
what that
going to be
was.
a bunch of buildings about as tall as Fish Hospital is there on
Mhm.
Capitol.
Yeah, it kind of squeezed it up higher. Commissioner Rutledge, have you given you a little bit of, I'm sorry.
Let's do something. So, and forgive me, this is how I understand this. Especially this English is not my first language, Portuguese is. So what I'm hearing is that you're willing to say no to all of this money because you're not seeing as much green as you would like to see in that area, even though you're not going to be living there.
That's what I heard.
Corporations want to make money, and in the past, they would abandon a building to build a new building because it was cheaper at the time than refurbish an old building. And then you end up with a large complex that's a concrete building, and somebody's got to figure out what to do with it. And Deltona's loaded with a few of those around. They're trying to figure out what to get businesses in there. And you eliminate the green space and the natural habitats. I mean, our city's already being impacted by the Victoria Park development and everything. The amount of water that used to flow through Lake Macy is 50% less than what it used to be.
So we're not going to have
The
the
widening
citizens
by four even compounded that problem.
So we're not gonna have the citizens of Lake County with their issues because again, there's not enough, even though it's the same amount as it was in the Unhold project. Because you're not happy with the layout, that's what I'm hearing.
I think you're just putting a heavier weight on those green issues, than the cons of the loss of green instead of the
I'm
pros
willing
of
to
the.
lose income
Right, exactly.
to maintain wildlife corridors and green spaces.
That,
Well, I can say this, you know, I'm certain Scott will probably kick me, and Rob Dolan will certainly kick me too under the table. The city of DeLand is not your friend.
I know that.
And I say that because there's already rumblings, which I'm sure Scott's heard of, that the city of DeLand maintains that the annexation into Lake Helen is illegal. That's why they filed the lawsuit. They said that the nature of the settlement that was entered into between the cities was illegal. And they're pushing me on one hand to have another conversation about this whole project because they say that had they been involved in this, it would already be built and it would already be occupied. And the bottom line of the city of DeLand is that the promise that was made to Lake Helen back in the day, and I'm not meaning to hurry up and get on with the past so we can't deal with the present, but the bottom line was that the arrangement that was made with the city of Lake Helen back in the day when that EC was developed to the north with no roadway access was ludicrous. It was absolutely ludicrous. I'm saying to you now that that property to the north of my property is going to be the cash register that's going to ring for the city of Lake Helen for generations to come, I'm sure. Because of the fact that there's been so much interest in that property in the past that was shunned and was sort of like the city of DeLand thumbing Lake Helen, if you will. Because everybody knew that nothing was going to happen there when there was no road access to the site. It was even mentioned in the comp plan, the words were right there. So, if nothing else, we're absolutely positively going to provide for the facility for that property to be developed at some point in time and truly provide the commercial revenue that the city of Lake Helen has been promised for generations. So, even though there's no such thing as a property that's perfect for everybody, that everybody can agree on, and I look at this myself and say there's things that I would much rather the automobile. It would be a Belleria for me because I'd have my Mazda store there, I'd have my Volkswagen store there, I'd have all of these other people in there, and I'd be a much happier person today than I actually am. And certainly my wife would be happier too. And the blunt fact of the matter is, something is going to go on here someday, and I think this is probably the most attractive product that ever go in there, certainly more attractive than traveling area. So I'm hoping that hearts and minds can be changed here at some point in time. I'm an environmentalist myself. I like environmental things. A lot of the things that I was doing at the Automotive Project were highly attractive in terms of the environmental things that were happening. And one of the things that I know that Stephen Campisi is going to put in here are charging points for these electric vehicles, which he has started to plan already with Future Energy Corp of America. So there's good stuff happening, even from an environmental standpoint on this site, as well as on the commercial place where the gas station and convenience store is going to go on the DeLand side of the operation.
yeah, that's one of the things that's always kind of burned me a little bit, is that all of those, what do they call, commercial out parcels, I think, yeah, proposed commercial out parcels are all on the land part. It's,
But the city of Lake Helen would make a lot more money on the multi-family than you would have if there was a gas station there, that's for sure.
maybe so, that's what I don't know.
And you get your share of that sales tax too.
Commissioner Rogers, you want?
Yes, thank you. So one of the things I heard you say is that there will be an agreement with the folks in there that are going in there to maintain the roads.
Yes, it's like a homeowners association, there's another name for it, it's not, I know Scott and I talked about that, there's a name for it, an industrial area, a green winery, yes, yes.
So
And
if
it's
we
not
have
just, it's
something,
not just roads, it's also the management of the stormwater elements and,
so we have something in writing already, or this is proposed, what
yeah,
you
it's in the agreement,
want to see happen?
it is in the agreement.
We don't have an actual application in hand, but that's what in preparation within the application.
I think you have the application.
We have an old application, but we don't have a current application. But it's,
You could do, actually.
well, let's not get too far down that road, because I don't believe we do have a current application.
We had that same agreement with the Woods, and now look where we're at, they want us to take the Woods over.
And that often happens.
Mhm.
That,
So
once the
this could
developer,
happen
once the
again.
developer, and cities always have I believe, cities have the option of accepting the road when it's deeded over from a development like that. So if
As long as,
they,
as long as we're brought up to standard.
yeah, if they build them to the right standards and then offer them to us, we can say yea or nay as to whether we'll.
We don't have to take those.
Right, I know, but I'm just saying, it could come up.
But we don't have to take it, is what I'm saying.
Exactly.
We're not forced to take it.
Sorry.
You're fine. Okay, so do we have, let me think how I wanna ask this. The city of DeLand's portion of this, parcel do we have something already in hand on what they're doing with theirs, and is it already moving forward?
Well, the entitlements in the city of DeLand are in the PD, the PD is really an agreement between both cities. And, anything that's on the DeLand side is technically transferable around the site, but there's some issues with that because of the nature of the position, for instance, of where the convenience store is. It has to be immediately available off the road, and because of that DOT restructuring of the access to that road, where the rest of it is not, you can't build a road anywhere else except right there. Of course, that's where a gas station, convenience store would have to go. So it's just logical that would go in that property. But no, there's no contract on any of that property on the land side now, the land side of the equation. There's some LOIs there, but there's no firm contract in place. The only firm contracts in place are for the multifamily, which essentially is commercial, and the townhomes, which are residential to the north of it. That's all that's in place right now.
Mayor, I have a quick question. I got a 6 o'clock meeting in Hollyhill I have to get to. I mentioned it to you when we set this appointment. Does anybody have any questions for me?
I had one I asked to leave.
This one?
Yeah.
What was it? I couldn't read again.
That's figures. But, I mean, it's not important that it's done today.
I think we're not gonna cross any lines here as far as taking any votes or anything like that, so I appreciate your letting us know where to be careful.
Yeah, don't vote on anything, don't make a motion, I think or anything like that. The intent here is to, pretty much with this dialogue that I'm hearing is, how do you feel about making this change, because it truly is a policy change. This whole area was intended 100% commercial industrial, now we're talking about a shift. That's a policy change that, you're supporting and don't support. That's what they're looking for, because there's a lot of work between now and getting you these documents, and up to this point, Lee and I have talked, and we've taken the position, been reviewing and communicating with Brendan and his team, that y'all approved this, so what type of documents do we need to present you to accomplish this goal? I'm not saying that you told us you want to approve it, but we have to just assume, because as soon as they're going to approve it, what documents we need to put in place to accomplish this if they want to approve it. So there's a lot of work to get to that point. So if we're trying to say if you don't feel comfortable moving forward with this type of change, then let us know. You can evaluate how it proceeds. If there's alterations to it, if you offer with the commercial residential or other things like that, throw those out there on the table and have dialogue. So he has an idea of Do I need to submit a variation of this, or find some other variation, or is this just a no? I always tell people, just remember this, we don't direct development. We can say what we want to go there, whether or not that actually occurs is not up to us, that's up to the market. But we can say, we want this, we don't want that, and that's all we can really do. But whether or not that actually occurs, we don't have a lot of control over that. We can say that's what we want, but if it's not something that the market will support, we may not get it. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, we could end up with absolutely nothing for a long time.
Which is maybe fine too, but it just, ultimately, it's what does the market drive?
So we can control residential.
Yeah, but if commercial is not, if we want commercial there, if the market doesn't want commercial there,
It's not gonna be there.
I'm gonna be there.
Right.
And I think-
And it's quite frankly, it's easier for Mr. Hurley to put in something that's already planned there, if he could find developers and people who wanted to be involved in that kind of project. They're not there.
I'd much prefer that too, because they pay more.
Yes, so I know there's beat the bushes looking for it, and I've talked to other people that sell high-end pieces, large parcels of property, development stuff, and apparently the stuff that we want there, believe it or not, there's not enough homes to support that stuff yet.
Right.
So
So they want,
the way the development is going, as far as homes are concerned, probably will happen down the road sometime, but I don't know how long that's going to be. And once again, one of the things that's driving me on this is this threefold. One, if it wasn't our property 5 years ago, it wasn't in the city of Lake County, this opportunity was not there for us. Therefore, somebody else, city planning could have done it, county could have done it, and we would have absolutely no say whatsoever. That's one. Number two is there is a huge parcel of property, which I would like to keep our commercial stuff on the other side of the interstate, that we can't get to right now because there's no road to it. This project will bring it in. And three, we have revenue need in this city that, I don't need to state that again and again and again because it hits us every single year at budget time. And the reality of it is, our infrastructure in this city is woefully inadequate because we don't have the money to pay for it. So, to me, I don't like development for the same reason Roger doesn't like it. And the same thing, the reason Charlene doesn't like it, is because I like things the way it always has been. But I deal with it because I know it's there, I know it's coming, I know there's not a damn thing that I can do to control it. Okay, so the best thing that I could do is kind of keep it as far away from me as possible, kind of keep it at arm's length. Can I get the good out of this without getting so much of the bad? And I personally believe that this is a decent compromise that's going to happen sooner. I think if we stick to our guns and keep it and don't change it, I think it will be many, many years down the road before the type of thing that we want in there comes to us. That's what I think. And
May I ask you a question?
Before you do, Scott, you were trying to leave.
Yeah, I was
I
gonna
think we're in the legal.
one of the things, if the main concern about residential, and some have mentioned this, is that going to Section 8 or deteriorating, quality. I don't think that's a concern with the townhouses, those are the individually owned, but with the apartments, it certainly is a concern. And I don't think we can come out and prohibit it in our regulations, but if that's a major concern, there may be things that we can do that require these apartments to be developed a certain way that discourages them. Maybe that we require larger sizes of apartments. If they're gonna bring in these young professionals, maybe the young professionals, maybe we want more 3-bedroom apartments and larger square foot apartments as opposed to smaller apartments. Maybe that would help make it less desirable to convert section. I don't know.
Then they
I
can
know we
squeeze more
can't
people in
prohibit
there.
it. What's that?
Then they can squeeze more people in there.
I don't know what would
I don't know.
tend towards Section 8 or not tend towards.
I don't know, we could look into that to see if there's something that, is, the type of property that usually gets converted, and the type of property that usually doesn't get converted. Maybe we can put in development regulations that require it to be developed in a way that would either discourage or make it so it's not as attractive to make two sections.
Well, Scott, if I could make the point that the product that we have under contract now, as you know, the Hill Point product is a very attractive product. And I don't want to lose that either, because who knows what's going to happen after that fact. But I do know what their plans are. I've seen their engineering. They have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars engineering this particular project. And I have all of the documentation to show that. So they haven't spent that money just because they want to. They've spent that money because they intend to move forward with this product. But at some point in time, they're going to lose their patience, and then I don't know what's going to happen. That's just, and to the point that you made, Rick, I would ask you, how would you feel if in front of the commission, you're presented with the opportunity by Lee to borrow $5, $6, $8, $10 million? That's coming. That's coming.
I understand.
And hi, Scott. Don't tell Bob.
See you Thursday.
You might be listening to.
So that's coming, and without revenue to produce it, and the projection even in the comp plan was for a decreasing population in Lake Helen, not an increasing population in the 2017 document. Who's going to pay that debt? Now, yes, I know some of it will be subsidized by the state, but nevertheless, it's still $5, $6, $8, $10 million, whatever it's going to be, with the stormwater and potable water and this and that and the other. This is the dynamo, and the property to the north, which you mentioned, that is the dynamo that will pay that debt, without any impact on Lake Helen property, or actually Lake Helen, whatever you want to call it.
Well, we've digressed down a couple of lines. Commissioner Rutledge, I don't know if you ever had your summation as far as, you asked the questions, but we kind of digressed from there.
No, that's fine. I wanted to come back to something that Commissioner Masco said. He said a couple of years ago this would have been an opportunity, but it is now. You know, it is our land now that we were able to make this decision on, and based on what I heard when I was campaigning, there's a lot of pushback from the citizens in the city that they don't want to see that developed as residential. So that's in the forefront of my mind when I'm considering all of the work we've put in here. I'm just hearing all of the citizens that I talk to, and their majority of the people I talk to do not want to see this developed residential. So that's kind of driving my thoughts. I would consider, it if the revenue for it was significantly larger than commercial. As you mentioned, that this could be a better deal in that way. So I definitely don't want to cut the hand off that may feed us financially, but it's concerning because I know there's a lot of citizen input that I received just recently, a year ago, that did not want to see this developed residentially. So,
Well, I think it has to be regarded as commercial, because multifamily is definitely commercial. And if you were to put a Bloom Dental in there, and a couple of offices, maybe a physician's office, the revenue return from those would be less than a tenth of what you're seeing.
right. Yeah, I understand. I think it's more so the dwellings and the added traffic to use of our resources by residents, the voting population increasing, et cetera, more
Might
so.
not vote for you, though.
They could. They could very well.
Is that your district, or?
It is one of them, yes.
I'll campaign for you.
Well, I appreciate that. I don't know if that gives you enough to go on, but it does make me very wary to move forward.
Well, I do understand that sometimes the loudest voices are the ones that get the most attention. But I've spoken to a lot of Lake Helen residents who are absolutely positively for this project, especially the people who know what the financial
Right.
situation is. And I don't want to name names and that, but I can probably have that discussion with you and tell you who these people are. We know all of them. But there's definitely, but unfortunately, they're the silent majority, you know? And there are some people who are basically against everything when it comes to development, that would like to see Tom Stewart's house raised happily in the land forever. And there's nothing I can do about that. And I've seen that in every project I've ever been involved in. I've seen that. Even when I expanded my dealership in the land, I saw that. When I built my dealership in Ocala, I saw that. And same thing with the one in Dublin, same thing with the one in Mary Island. There's always resistance, and then you find out who the people who really are for it don't say anything. Unfortunately.
Well, I think every politician, every leader gets to the point that sometimes they run into that age-old, where, you know, the immovable logic hits the unstoppable force.
Yeah.
And that is, do you do the will of the people, or do you do what you think is best for the majority of the people?
It's a tough spot.
Because sometimes they're not the same.
No.
And some people are visionaries, some people have the ability to see things that other people can't see, and it becomes extremely difficult when they're being bombarded by people that they want. They don't know what they want, but they think they know what they don't want.
Good point, yeah.
And the difficult thing about that is property owners have rights, and you put comp plans in place to help shape your community, and you put zoning in place to help enforce those things. And this is a dynamic equilibrium. These things are constantly in motion, and it's our job to be able to look down the road and see, okay, where are we going? What's this going to do? What's this impact? I know one thing: we don't figure out a revenue source for this community. I've heard an adage that I've heard from people before say, you know, we always figure out a way to get by. At some point, that doesn't happen anymore.
Right.
At some point, it builds up to a point where you just can't provide the services that you need to, and it comes to that critical mass point.
And then you're probably absorbed by the
Yes.
owner, absorbed by the land. Or
Yes, and we're seeing it right now, reared its ugly head with potable water. Okay? We know that our stormwater system isn't adequate to a tune of probably $8 to $10 million. We haven't done it before. You talked about septic tank earlier. It's only a matter of time before, you know, the players to be making a decision to force you to do one way or the other, are going to push us into these new septic systems that currently are running from $25,000 to $30,000, up from what used to be $5,000.
Or a package kind of for good.
Yes, okay, or that's today, you know, are they gonna be 50,000 down the road? Our little community here it's got, the wave is cresting. And, just because of the cost of things, and the fact that there are certain things we have no control over, and septic tanks is one of them, that I have a real fear that if we don't figure out our resolution, we don't get that in the pipeline, you know, we could be gone before we have an opportunity to make a decision again. But
Well, now that Scott is gone, I can tell you again, and Rod, the reason Rod Jones is here with me today is because I wanted to be able to speak frankly. And I can tell you that the city of DeLand is poised like a vulture. I know this to be so, because of conversations that I've heard that I perhaps shouldn't have heard, and because of things that have been talked about in the back rooms between attorneys.
yeah, because they're pissed off at GMs in the city of Lake County.
We are in a situation where we need something to be done too. We're spending money every day.
Yeah.
So
I get it.
if this doesn't happen, we're gonna have to find something else that may not be as good as this.
Yeah, I
Because otherwise, how do we,
I understand.
it's going bankrupt.
I want to weigh in and address a couple of the points you just brought up, Mr. or Vice Mayor Basso. And you're right, there's representative government, if I can wax eloquent for a moment. Representative government requires us to be two things at the same time. One is representatives of the people and what they think. So we have to kind of channel that to some extent, but we also have to be up here as elected representatives individually to where we gather the information that we have time to gather. We take the time to gather and sift through and weigh and make an informed decision that the average citizen can't make in just like a general democracy setting. It's a representative government, which, we have to make choices that go against what most of our constituents would tell us to do, because we know it's the right thing now that we've got all the information. We bumped up against that, I believe, when we got to the stormwater, just as you mentioned. But then we saw what happened. We agreed to increase the stormwater assessments, and then everything blew up, and we backed off and didn't actually increase the assessments. So that tension hasn't gone away. And as Commissioner Rutledge said, when I was campaigning, high-density residential development is almost fighting words amongst most people here in Lake Helen. They don't want to see it anywhere, not no way, not no how.
Even if it's on the other side of I-4.
Yes, even then, because it's just that, and I don't want to characterize it in a completely negative way, but it's just a hell no kind of attitude that people, anywhere they can say no, they're going to say no. I think there's a possibility that you could change hearts and minds with the argument that it is over there, and we will see, great revenue from it as opposed to, there is that argument to be made, and hopefully hearts and minds can be changed from your point of view. But the reality is that's where hearts and minds are right now. And I think we've all heard that in our campaigns and whatnot. We know we can't just blindly stick our heads in the sand. We're kind of caught in between the two. We're caught in between people wanting to, like the faith development down here. And people push back hard on that. But the reality is they have property rights to make development. It just happens. We didn't have any way to say no, realistically, at all. So those things are being built right now. And like you say, in the woods, they're just building, because everybody has property rights, and it's gonna keep happening.
Seems like everybody except me.
Well, I understand. And that's kind of what I'm saying, is that we're not gonna stop development, even though we get people pushing on us all the time, saying, no matter what you do, you gotta say no to high residential or high density development. And when I was running, I told people over and over again, I said, I am not for high density residential development in Lincoln. I said that dozens and dozens and dozens of times on the campaign trail. That was my, and I've told Mr. Hurley this in conversation before. That's what I told people.
That's not really in Lake Helen.
Well, and I could make that argument, but boy, I sound a whole lot like a politician. I would sound a whole lot like a politician at that point.
Maybe we could just incorporate it back to the land.
Well, I don't know what the options are there, and that's a reasonable question. And I wouldn't say no necessarily, but I don't think it can happen. If I had a conversation with the city attorney, I wish he was here when that question was asked, but I'll relay as best I can.
Well, ask him about the conversation he had a couple of weeks ago with Darren Nordheim, and he might give you a different tip.
Well, maybe so, and I understand that there may be, when you get into the law, there's your point of view, and then there's what the judge actually says at the end of the case.
On a given day.
And that can be a matter of a given day. I get that. That's why they say, a bad settlement is always better than a good lawsuit. Because you never know on any given day what's going to happen.
Well, I spent $384,000 defending
But
Lake Helen and annexing the property into Lake Helen.
and I understand and appreciate that.
Maybe that history isn't that important, but it is.
But it is important. It matters. But what Scott said, the city attorney said, was that once land is incorporated into a city, you cannot disincorporate it. You can't say,
You can de-annex.
it
Costs money, but you can de-annex.
that was not my understanding from the city attorney. You may be right, but the city attorney said you're wrong.
State law allows
That's not what he said.
It does indeed allow, and Butch Paul told me the same thing. I had that
Well-
conversation with him. The thing is that the annexation of the
Okay.
illegal.
Like I said, there's always two points of view in law, but our city attorney said,
We'll hopefully not get to that.
what's that?
We'll hopefully not have to get to
I know,
that.
and I'm not saying we should have to get to that. I'm just saying, you know, the idea, the concept came up. So I wanted to say what he did share with me, is that we can't just de-annex this.
But frankly, this is a gift for us, I mean, to be blunt about it, it absolutely is.
I
And I understand that there's sometimes they call it caves, citizens against virtually everything.
Yeah, cave dwellers.
Yeah, cave dwellers, and there are those folks, and unfortunately, politicians have sometimes to be governed by those people. And, you know, you take a position that's not popular with the vocal minority, and suddenly you've got an influencing factor there that becomes political. And what happens?
You can turn around and do more for people.
Well, I will, in my summation, if you will, I've mentioned this to you before, I have made those promises on the campaign trail and in many conversations with people that I am not for high residential or high density residential development within the city of Lake County. What people were concerned about when we were having those
I'm saying the
conversations.
city of Lakeland, you mean the Atkins.
I know, I'm not lost, that's not lost on me, don't worry. When I was having those conversations with people, typically, what people were concerned about was the pasture area, the Costco. And that going into 3-story apartment complexes, which a lot of people can see that vision and think, that's what they're afraid of. I don't think it could happen because of our septic tank stuff, but they could put in a package plan, who knows? Nobody wants to see that. That's what the conversation was really around. It really wasn't around what's gonna happen on the other side of it. But I don't wanna sound like that politician that's making that excuse. Yeah, I ran on this, but I didn't really mean over there. I don't wanna sound like that politician ever.
The happy thing about the septic tank situation is you couldn't put anything in there anyway, because you'd have to force me to deal with it.
I understand.
Naturally.
I understand. And that's one of the things that septic tanks, one of the reasons I like them. But you're right, we may get pushed at some point, but right now, I don't want to be pushed because it does.
To me, it's a property size.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
if you're on acre and quarter or larger, and you're not near an aquatic body that you can have phosphates get into that water system, I am a big fan of septic tanks. Okay. But when you go to higher density, or you get into properties that your phosphates can impact that water column that density winds up in the lake, I'm not a fan.
Right, and even just our build out now, if we go from 3,000 to 6,000 people, even just that could turn our lake into a big algae pond. I mean, I don't know what could happen in the future.
Well, my guess is the state's gonna come in and
If it starts in that direction, they would come in and.
it's already headed in that direction.
Yeah, it could be, yeah. Now, as the city attorney said at the beginning of the meeting, there's no requirement for public input. There's only 4 people here. If y'all would relinquish the podium a little bit, I would like to open up the floor because people come and sit here for 3 hours. I hate not to let them talk for a minute or 2.
They didn't even have to move from there.
No, but you have to come to the podium and state your name and address. But if any of y'all would like to say something, Mr. Cook, I'll give you the floor first, but if anybody else wants to talk.
Okay, Alan Cook, 792 Oak Tree Lane, and a concerned citizen. Now, I got involved with this with a gentleman called Fred Stewart. Back 2 years ago, he was ready to build a hotel. I was working with Fred and everything. And believe it or not, I was excited about it because I had Fred working with, Oh, the mayor. After. We were working together, and he wanted to build that hotel. So I had talked to him and everything, and I had him almost talked into helping with the water system to come across Ford, because he would have his hotel. Because that, otherwise you have to put in like brick a pump station and all that. But if we could get water in and everything else, we'd be all right. I was very excited about that at the time. And everything. We were moving forward. Now, the only two concerns is this is the one. Okay? We were working on that was a go. Basically, everything Fred was well more. Bob was, at that back then, everything was working out pretty good. I was excited about it. So right now, I'm in a position right now, I would like to know, as a taxpayer, what are we doing with the water? Are we gonna get the land's water? What's the situation? And I just wanted to know a little bit about where we stand, because that was a big thing, to get that order mall in there, to be able to get Lake Elm some water. And sewer, I'm sorry, and sewer. So I would like to know, where are we, before we keep going with this thing, I'd like to know, where do we stand right now as far as the water and sewer coming from that piece of property that now things either we own.
Yeah, I can answer that.
Okay, that's all I mean, that's what I was.
But the answer to it is I brought utilities from the city of DeLand into the site. And the connection area now is to the east of where Frontage Road, whatever they call it. It is going
I'm sorry, Mr. Hurley, let me interrupt you for just a second. Alan, was that your only, question? Okay, I was gonna say, if you could ask, go ahead and ask me a couple of questions, and then you can come back to the building, of course, because otherwise we'll have no real record of this, people do want to hear.
Okay, then I just have another question quick. And that is, I've been involved with working, doing this and everything else. What I'd like to know, if it's possible, because the wetland is gonna, you have to designate so much for wetlands. All I was asking was, can we put part of that, because I worked with St. John's for years, and the difference is, can we get some of that wetlands into the part of the bill, in the area, so we have a little, instead of a big pond, maybe have 3 or 4 little ponds, you get my point, to make it look a little bit better.
Sure.
But,
I can come up and answer those questions.
okay, now, just quick on the way out is, thank you for sticking with us, okay? And don't give up.
Okay.
Believe me, thank you. Really.
Thank you for understanding my interruption.
And thank you for having my time.
Yeah.
Wake up, come on, wake up.
On the subject of utilities, we brought the utilities slightly to the east of where Frontage Road, whatever it's going to be called, is. And from that point, it's going to be brought into the Hill Point project, and it's going to tee off in various places within the site. And of course, it has to maintain circular motion for the utilities to work. So the opportunity to Jack and Bore under I-4 is probably going to be best accomplished from the Hill Point site, because it's proximate to where that bridge is. And from what I understand from an engineering standpoint, it can't be too close to the bridge, but it's best to have it somewhat close, but not too close. So at that point, there would be a T-junction under I-4 to the Lake Allen side. I wouldn't be the one paying for that, but whoever wants to develop on the Lake Allen site, or if the city would choose to do it themselves and charge a developer an impact fee for access to that. I'm sure Lee is familiar with how those types of arrangements work. They can be very attractive and very lucrative for the city who does it. Of course, it requires that you spend money. I'm quite certain that the cost of Jack and Bore under I-4 now is considerably more expensive than it was when Bobby Luther got the pricing for it a number of years ago. And at that point, I think it was $280,000. Today, I'm going to say multiply it by 2, for 3.
probably.
Yeah, that's reasonable.
And of course, at that point, if the assumption was made by Bobby Luthra that he would connect to the Automall situation, and I guess he was gonna pay for it himself, but I can't really speak to it other than that. And on the subject of, the second question, the wetlands, the way the stormwater now is laid out is preliminary. But we do have several areas. If you look at where that thumb is, that's stormwater up to the north. And the contemplation there is that that wetland area and that stormwater pond would also service the needs of some development to the north. So what the engineers, Zeb Cohen and associates told me, specifically Dwight, told me that the idea of putting it there, even though it seems like it's a premium piece of real estate right along I-4, the idea of putting it there makes it considerably easier for development to the north to happen. It just makes sense, because that pipe can come right down along the border with I-4. It just works. And then there's several other areas. The quality of the wetlands in there are poor. They're not very eco-diverse. They're not good wetlands on the site. And the wetness of the property has increased because of the development to the north and because they made some assumptions about the soils that were incorrect to the north. They maintained that it was calcified sand. In fact, some of it's really plastic/clay. So their calculations of percolation and porosity, and I've had to get involved in all of this, become quite expert in it, were wildly wrong. So a lot of that water is sheeted onto my property, and when we develop it, we'll make a better job of that to make sure that it goes where it's supposed to go. So I hope that.
So we're still looking at putting the water over to Lake Elm, or, I'm sorry, this is Lake Elm, but over to us over here. In other words, it's still gonna come across I-4. Do you feel that the developer would come for that, to pay for that, to get it across?
Well, I know so, because it's.
I mean, I know we can't, but, you know.
Well,
Okay, it's independent. All right, that's all I hear. I'm not-
one of the things that's going to happen, okay, whether it's DEP, EA, health department, whatever, they're gonna mandate at some point, you're either gonna go to high-end septic tanks, or you're not gonna have to, you're gonna have to go on sensors. When that happens, usually, if the state mandates that, there is grant opportunities or even free money funding opportunities to be able to do some of those things. But I believe we have a responsibility to the citizenry to figure out our own revenue streams so we can help solve some of our own problems and not just wait and hope that somebody else is going to take care of it for us.
Well, did anybody else want to speak? Mr. Preston?
Hi, Todd Preston, 352 Connecticut Avenue. I just made some talking points that are just direct to you while you're doing your considerations. First one is comp plan calls for the city to be expanded out to 6,000 people over a 35-year period. So you've already planned for that. These homes over here on the other side of the highway, in my opinion, natural resources are a plus because the sewers would go to DeLand for those homes. And DeLand will provide the water so it won't impact our water infrastructure here. Also, when you take, if we have 6,000 planned and we have 3,000 now, that's 3,000 more residents. I presume it's 400 homes. To me, that would be more than 10% of the future build out you can take care of now by putting it on sewer, going to another city, rather than putting in those septic tanks in the future to meet your build out. Let's see.
So I'm sorry, I'll let you keep talking, but those actually, that 6,000 was what the comp plan changed to. This would be in addition to that. So these 1,000 or so residents, of which perhaps 400 would be voters, would be in addition to that. So we did ultimately end up, if we approve this, it would be a 7,000-ish build out potential. And we pop in 1,000 of that.
Okay, so, but you're taking, so
But it doesn't, you're
from
right, it
3,000 to
doesn't
7,000, that's 4,000. If you take 400 homes, you know, and put them on sewers, you don't have to address that in the future.
You're right, it does a good infrastructure to it, forward.
To resolve a good chunk of what you're gonna have to deal with down the road, you know, right away. You talk about the voter population increasing it, but that also includes, you're increasing the head count for state and federal dollars. Take that into consideration. Yeah. One personal thing is I want to add, when you build more houses, you say it's going to require more schools, you mentioned Ivy Hawn, I just want to reiterate, Ivy Hawn is capped, and I don't care how many homes you put in, you won't get more kids than Ivy Hawn. Don't forget that. If the city doesn't want this, which is understandable, then they really need to be fair and come up with an alternative that's viable for you and the developer, because they own the property and somebody has a right to develop the land. And last thing is, sewer and water are already available on this side of the highway. Don't forget that. They come from downtown. That's it.
Thank you. I don't see any other hands going up, and that's fine. Just wanted people to have the opportunity if they want. So we're a little more split than I expected. We get have support from Commissioner Vice Mayor Basso. Got to get used to saying that. Commissioner Bishop has said no. Commissioner Eckert has said no. And these are all based on what we know right now. This is not a vote. And Commissioner Rutledge has said she's maybe amenable, but basically no right now. And
Right now, it would be no.
yeah, if you were put to it right now, but we don't have, maybe by numbers. And to be clear, she is a CPA by trade, is that right? You are in accounting. She's in accounting, so the numbers.
Hopefully CPA.
Yeah, so numbers are really in her wheelhouse. So I certainly understand why that would affect your viewpoint.
And to that point, I did math, and it looks like it's gonna take at least 4 years to recoup what we'll have to put into it initially.
4 0?
4 0. No, 4 years.
4 years to recoup our initial input, okay. Yeah, it'll be interesting, if we get to that point, it'll be interesting to see what those numbers come from a full workup of that really weighs everything in. And my indication, if I was unclear, is that right now, I also would vote no. But if those numbers come back and really surprise me, I could perhaps change my mind, but it's unlikely. My leaning is, my bias is, if you will, that residential is, even high density residential is basically break even. This will be better than break even, but not enough better. And I have made so many promises over the course of my political life here against high density residential that it would be very difficult for me to change that.
You couldn't recast it as being commercial because it is?
No, I understand that. And as I said, when we were talking about having to do what even people don't want us to do, I can definitely vote against what people holler about. We saw that in the meeting over stormwater. There were a bunch of people here hollering at us not to raise those taxes. And I absolutely voted that we still need to raise those taxes. We've got to do it. People don't want it, but we've got to do it. So I don't mind voting against what people holler about. But that's where I stand right now. I don't know to me, I don't think these numbers are gonna look that much different as pure commercial would look. If I'm wrong, if it's, okay, I like pictures, if this is residential and this is commercial, and if it splits the middle dead even, it would still be a tough decision. If it's up quicker, closer to commercial as far as how much revenue we're gonna see versus expenses, if it's gonna be that much closer to a cash cow like true commercial, then I will be swayed by that. If it comes in closer to where it's basically break even over the years, because there's a lot of complications to this. We're gonna be dealing with the land for water and sewerage and all the billing for that. We're gonna be dealing with them probably for police protection as well. And there will be, or we'll be having to increase our police, which is significant, because police goes basically just per numbers. It's per 100 people, you need X number of police coverage. So it's gonna be a direct impact immediately upon completion and filling of these units. Our police force is gonna increase significantly, by like 40%. And that's the biggest part of our budget. Police force is how much of our budget? 60%? About 60% of our budget, and if that increases by 40%, that's hard to.
Well, that increase is only $182,400.
It's significant though.
Well, when you have 2 million coming in, it's not that significant.
That's why I need to see all these numbers weighed off.
Well, I am curious to hear why Heather said 2 years to break even, because the impact to Lake Helen from an expenditure standpoint doesn't actually happen until everything is built. But in the meantime, Lake Helen has all of the revenue from the permitting, from the impact fees, and the impact fees that I used there was only $1,280 a unit. In fact, it's more like $2,200 when you add everything up. So.
I was looking at this here, and these numbers,
But that's from your own comp plan, though, that's not me. That has nothing to do with our numbers, that's just your own comp plan and the projection as to what you would have to spend. And they tell it properly, not on the far side, because the far side has no impact on those numbers on the other side of I-4. That's only to do with what the projections were in 2017, I think?
2017, yes.
Yeah. Well, so that's just an extrapolation of what those improvements would cost Lake Helen, actually Lake Helen, today to do. And all I did there was a little bit of math to show because at some point, money is going to have to be borrowed.
Right.
To do that. And what I'm trying to say is, I can be the hero that runs in, and with, not me, the project would offset some of the need to borrow funds to pay.
But if we're looking at those figures and how much we'll have to borrow in order for it to start being profitable based off of just those basic needs, without anything that we haven't foreseen already, that could come up, because those things do.
But that has nothing to do with my project.
Right, but those things, we are going to have to pay for certain things over there, like the stormwater.
No, you're not.
We're not paying.
Well, that's what we've got to see the breakdown on this.
Right, okay.
But we do have
No
to
expenses account for any of the development on the project.
All
I know it might sound too good to be true, but it's.
Yeah,
it
all
is true.
three waters, potable water, sanitary sewer, stormwater, are all taken. It's not on our plan. It's not on.
Zero expense for the county.
Okay,
So,
thank you for
we'll
clarifying.
have, the big one is police. The second big one is staffing. The next one is how it impacts voting. I really think traffic is way down the list in the whole scheme of things.
It's less than a third of what it would have been with the other one.
Right, exactly.
But I don't think that's to be underestimated completely though. We would underestimate it at our peril, because 1,000 people in Mr. City Administrator, I believe the estimate per resident is 10 trips per day. That you have to anticipate 10 trips per day per resident, and that's just in and out of that opening. It's not through the streets of Lake Helen, because most of them will be going further west. But most of them will be going to Deland, but it will be an increase in traffic. It will make a difference.
And that frontage road, when it gets built, will make a difference too, because people can go right up to 44 essentially from there.
Yeah, and you're right, that will be an assist.
But I ain't paying for it.
This won't be the first time I was on the wrong end of a 4-1 vote.
Well, and it's not, like you said, it's not a vote, be careful. That's all we can do this evening, is just to share what our ideas and where our stand is right now. And that's the first I've heard this from any of these people. I just for the record's sake, we really do take the Sunshine Law seriously. This is the only way we can share our views on this. And I can freely ask anybody up here if they've ever told me one word about this, and none of them have. We do all take this seriously. I've shared my thoughts with you, Mr. Hurley, and will anytime freely. But I heard answers I didn't expect. And I'm fine with that. It's been interesting. I hope it's been enlightening. I hope you've heard enough to decide, to inform your decisions going forward.
To be depressed?
Maybe. It is, I know you have that, or I believe you have that financial impact study in the works. And if that's.
So you all aren't going to believe that, though, so it's.
I think we will believe it. That's our bias. You're right. Our bias is we're jaded. We're jaded, I guess is the best way to put that. But I don't think we're unteachable. We'll look at it and we'll know, and our financial people will look at it and vet it, and we'll take a fair look at that. But I don't know if that'll be enough of a difference here today.
It's not going to be much more than what you have there now, because what the numbers that you see now are a result of that discussion.
Right. So we're looking at about $2 million.
Over 2 years, you could.
Yeah, $2 million over a couple of years, and about $500,000 of expenses. That sounds really great.
Well, if that number is verified by your people, and if that number is real, how do you feel about it?
A fair question, and it would still. It would still be difficult to vote yes, but I that's more than I expected to see. What is that?
That's something
3-1 revenue versus what's that?
That's something you take to the people and talk to them and see how they feel.
Yeah. That's a $3 of revenue for every dollar of expense. If that's the way it fleshes out, that'd be fantastic. I can't believe that it will. I'm jaded, I suppose. But if that's the way it fleshes out and our people look at it, that would be something I could take to the people. But
So how do you feel
that's how I feel. If it came back 3-1, $2 million versus $500,000 expense, 3-1. That I could take to people and say, look, we'd be foolish not to. The other side of it, a very real part of this, and you've said it several times, this is a bird in the hand. This is something that is, you've got contracts in hand, you've got engineering going on. This is a bird in the hand. And if we just try and do something, we can't make something else happen because we want it to, as you were talking about earlier, Vice Mayor. Just because we want it doesn't make it happen. What we want doesn't create development. We can't create because we want commercial. We can't create commercial. The money's not there for it. You've shot for it. But apparently the money is not there right now. So this is what we have an option for right now. It's the only option we have right now. So saying no to it is difficult at best.
But it looks like most, except for Mr. Basso.
I'm a little bit on the fence with Commissioner Rutledge. We've got one strong no, one a little less strong no. And I mean, these are vague things, I know, but that's kind of where we are.
I will look at those numbers.
What's that?
I'm willing to look at those.
I'm not saying they're close.
No, I'm just saying, I'm willing to look at those numbers.
But that's what we have to offer you tonight. I think it was worth the time to hear it out, and I appreciate very much your presentation as to what this is. We're all better educated, so if we ever do come to a vote on this, we'll be more able to properly assess and do our jobs.
So what is the next step, or is that a lead question? What happens?
I believe that is a lead question, and,
If it's a lead question, I intend to bring it up to Thursday night as to the cost of a financial analysis of whatever they produce. They have yet to produce anything that's,
right, we don't have anything in hand yet.
now, if they do produce something and you would like us to do it, I have an estimate of $12,000 to $15,000 from a financial consultant, to analyze it.
Okay.
Well, I'm certainly not gonna spend $12,000 to $15,000 or anything. I mean, I've had a consultation that I have not had a bill for yet, but the next thing that I do is going to cause me to have a bill, so why would I bother if you're gonna do yours anyhow?
Well, no,
The numbers I
that's
have
just,
are commercial numbers right off the tax rolls.
yeah,
I took the project over on MLK and used that number to establish the value, and
and that's where it starts, and the 12,
that's the biggest source of
I'm
income.
surprised it's that high, but that's just simply to review numbers, that's not to create numbers.
That's either way, actually. But there's two parts of the equation, of course, I'm sure you all recognize that, as revenue and expenditures. And not only now, but 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now. And those are highly subjective, of course, but they need to be quantified in some form or fashion. So it's something I'm not expecting you to react to tonight, but I would bring it up Thursday night to get direction from the commission as to how you want us to proceed.
Right, okay.
Well, I can tell you the ad valorem calculation is right out of the county records, so that's easy to verify. And the $150,000 per unit is very conservative for the multifamily, because the product over on MLK is more than that. And you can look that up on the tax rolls, and the estimate of $250,000 after the $50,000 credit for the townhomes, that's very, very conservative. So those numbers, which produce the greatest amount of revenue, are spot on.
Sure, and I understand that, and I'm sure your numbers are not far off, but, you know, until we have it fully massaged. And that's fine, I'm not saying that as a negative, it's just we don't have it fully developed in front of us. And the 10 to 15,000, you know, we'd be foolish not to spend it to, you know, that sounds like a lot of money, but it's not. Looking at a project like this, we don't mind spending on I don't think we mind spending money to properly vet what we're gonna be voting on. We need to fully understand what we're gonna be voting on. So I don't think we'd be hesitant to spend that money. So we're not gonna say, oh, we're not gonna spend 10 grand. And just, that's not gonna be a big hurdle for us, I don't believe. So we'll look at it and we'll do our due diligence, which shouldn't take all that long. I don't think once we get numbers from whatever consultant you would hire, I don't think it would take us long to review that, but it would, you know, it's just a step in the process that I think we'll be willing to take from what.
Well, hopefully you can review what you have here, and
We will.
because I don't think you need to do too deep of a dive into it. To Lee's point, there are unforeseen things that may happen. Maybe the DEP will come out and say, hey, listen, you need to have force main right away in that culvert because your septic tanks are leaching. And in which case that changes the whole expense budget for the city, which I can't control.
Sure.
So there are things like that that are unpredictable.
Well, yeah, and we're not looking for absolute perfect prognostication or anything like that. We just need to, you know, a basic comparison of revenue and expenditures as what the city, how it will affect the city, as opposed to when you're putting your numbers together, typically you put together, not typically, and as anybody would, you know, your pro forma as to how it affects your bottom line. Well, we've got to look at it as how it affects our bottom line.
Yeah.
And that's all.
I didn't calculate how much 4 police officers would cost for 3 and all of that, so I didn't factor that in there. I just.
That's where our due diligence will come into play. So, but thank you for your time, thank you for your presentation, and thank you for the way you've dealt with the city. He's been, you know, good with us, good to deal with. I know there's been a lot of frustrations and whatnot from our side. I don't want us to be any more frustrating than we have to be. But we're a political body, and I'm just trying to be as open to you about where we are as I can be. This is as open as I can be. is let everybody speak their piece and.
Well, I'm sorry that it's a bit of a blizzard of grenade, and I recognize that. It's-
No, it is what it is. It's not wrong, it's not bad. It's not wrong, it's not bad. This process isn't immoral, it's just frustrating at times, and I apologize for that. It just is what it is, though. But thank you very much. Anything further that we need to do before we adjourn? Anybody have anything they need to do before we adjourn? Hearing none, meeting adjourned.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.